I'm going to use video games as a metaphor for
Let our
literature.
enemies choke upon their
With
territorial
things like Fortnite
ambitions.
and Call of Duty pumping out colorful, exciting brain rot every season, it serves as lowbrow entertainment for the masses. And yet, so many people are disgusted by this and stop playing, or keep playing only because it's accessible and easy. But they're still left unsatisfied, yearning for something that's more than skin deep. And that's why other games like this, Helldivers 2, it's a sequel to a game few people remember, made by a studio no one's ever heard of. But a little over a year ago,
There's
Helldivers 2
something here.
happened and took the gaming industry by force. Democratic force. It became a cultural phenomenon, and I mean, just look at it. Look at this. Look at the scene, the atmosphere, the aesthetic, the drip, for lack of a better term.
Dropping a pin.
This is art. This is made by someone who loved the game, not the money that the game would bring them. That's why I'm here. My name is Chase, and I'm the author of the sci-fi book series The Descendant Saga. These books that I've written are my passion, my love for the genre, for science fiction. I write these books not in the pursuit of
Found
money,
something.
but because I have to. This powerful story inside of me, and I have to write it down and put it out there, get it out of my head, make enough space in my mind for my mortal vessel to contain my soul. There's an aesthetic, a classic aura, as the kids these days say, to many of the books that I love. Authors like Robert Heinlein or David Brin, for example. I love these books, those authors, that time frame, that style of science fiction. And they've inspired me so much, not just in my writing, but in my life, my curiosity, my drive.
Tagging map.
And so now I bring you my own classically inspired style of writing. An Orson Scott Card meets Tom Clancy kind of deep thought-provoking military sci-fi that I hope is worthy of my grandfather's Frank Frazetta style art that I'm putting on the covers. That's why I'm here. If you've been following the channel, you know I've been writing these books, working on this for a long time. And all of that is finally coming to fruition.
There's something here.
If you're not new, please subscribe to the YouTube channel.
Dropping
Stay
a
up to
pin.
date on things that I'm writing, when they're coming out, when they'll be available. The best ways to get them. And you'll find not just my commentary, but
Found
the
something.
links, like the links down in the video description. You're going to have access to other stuff that isn't in the books. Lore, memes in our Discord community server, our monthly newsletter Tightbeam that has all
something
kinds
here.
of not just the lore, but backstory, free content, short stories, updates, goals, hopes, dreams. Let me give you the medium length version of how I got here, of how the Descendant Saga has ended up where it is today, and why Nerdsmith Consolidated, my publishing company, exists.
Helldiver, you are moving outside the mission
I
area.
wrote the first draft of the first book on night shift in 14 days. not 14 consecutive days. It wasn't 2 straight weeks of just writing. It was 7 consecutive weekends in August and September of 2017. But I was working night shift. I'd been working night shift for years, and I would continue working night shift for years after that. I did not have a whole lot of social interaction. I did have a social circle, but my friends and I were living on opposite sides of the sun. And so I had this idea. I wanted something original, something that was mine. And I had several false starts, and I always ended up fearing, it was too similar to Halo, or too similar to Starship Troopers, or this, or that. And eventually I gave up. And then I tried to write fantasy. And again, I couldn't find something that was mine.
Found something.
That was my own and wasn't just Tolkien light. And I gave up on that too. But I had a lot I had already written. I had an entire trilogy of books that were, to be honest, terrible Battletech fan fiction that I had written in high school. But they existed, and I had a lot of backstory for a particularly nasty antagonist. And so, after not writing for nearly a year, because I was ready to give up on my inability to find and make anything original, I was struck with an idea that it was a physical blow to me. What if it wasn't science fiction? And what if it wasn't fantasy? What if it was both? Now, I'm fully aware that science fantasy is a thing, and at the time maybe I wasn't quite so cognizant of that. But now I had this idea, and it had a grip on me, and I could not ignore it. I had to write. I no longer cared if it was original, if it was mine, if it was different, if it was unique so that it would stand out. I just had to write it. And that's how this first book happened. I wrote the first draft over 7 consecutive weekends, making 14 days. And the idea then and now still is so all-consuming inside my head that I have to keep writing. I took a break when I finished the first book, and I literally typed the end. I drank some water, and I sat for about an hour, and I listened to some music.
Dropping a pin.
And then I started writing the second book. Well, now I have 7 books, and many more planned. But that's a thing for the future, not yet. We're still talking about the first book. I took this manuscript to a couple of my family members. I don't know what I was expecting or hoping for. I just had this feeling that I had to do something with it. I had made this thing. And much to my surprise, my father said something along the lines of, "That's not trash." Which, from him is fairly high praise.
Mission at 30 minutes remaining.
So I kept going, and I wrote the second book, and I started editing this first one. And my grandmother was actually helping me edit. And it's thanks to her that I have the confidence in my writing. You know, in the improvement, how much better it had gotten from that first draft to
Orbital barrage
what she helped me get it.
Stand clear.
She suggested to me I take it to the local festival of books. I had not heard of such a thing. I didn't know this existed. What it was.
I'm out.
Deploying support weapon.
So I asked, what's this? What do you mean, festival of books? Nonchalant. She's like, oh yeah, it's tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow. So I pulled an all-nighter and I read my book. I made another draft. I made more changes. I took out my Oxford commas. I fixed compound sentences. I replaced verbs. I straightened out the then and then. And I put on a nice t-shirt. Button-up shirt. And went out to this festival of books with 3 cheap USBs in my pocket, carrying digital copies of my book. And I went around talking to people, talking to other authors, publishers, anyone and everyone at this festival of books.
Main objective
This is in
nearby.
2018.
Objective critical stratagem available.
I found a publishing company that had a booth there. 2 people sitting at it, including their chief editor. I ended up for over an hour standing in the grass in the sun, tired, but overcome with this kind of not a nervous energy, but the way a nerd who is disgustingly educated on an obscure topic finds someone that's interested in their obscure topic of choice.
Fire in the hole.
And I just info dump
Objective
on this
critical
chief
stratagem
editor
available. Deploying support
for over an hour. And she asked a couple of questions, but mostly she just let me talk. And I was starting to think that she was just being nice and letting me talk.
Fire in the
And I
hole.
was tired. And it was hot. 'Cause this is in Arizona, remember? An actual desert. Well, I was ready to give up. I was leaving. And then she asked me for a copy. She requested that I submit my manuscript. So she took one of my USBs, jacked it into her laptop then and there, and it was entered into her publishing company's pool of submissions.
Deploying equipment package.
I shan't name this publishing company, but we'll get to the reason why.
Tagging
About
back.
6 weeks later, they emailed me saying they wanted to print my book, and they sent me a simple 2-page PDF contract. I printed it out, I signed it, I scanned it, I sent it back. And now, in April of 2019, my book was under contract. I wasn't just a writer anymore, I had become an author. I was getting published. And that meant something to me. This thing that I had made, this inconsolable, uncontrollable passion, this irrational excitement that causes me to play gratuitous music too loud and hammer on my keyboard like the million chimpanzees that write Shakespeare. And I kept writing, and I was fulfilled. Until I wasn't. The book did not get published. At least not with that publisher. They accused my grandfather's previously mentioned Frank Frazetta style hand-painted watercolor art that we were to use as the cover. I had gotten special permission to get to use for the cover rather than whatever their in-house artist would have generated. And they said that was sexist because there's a shirtless man with a spear or something. I don't know. It was not made terribly clear to me. There was other inconsistencies I figured out through the irregular email traffic from them, and we decided to part ways. And in that parting of ways, there is an NDA. I can't tell you who. I don't know if they even still exist. The chief editor that I had been talking to at that Festival of Books in this time frame had also left this publishing company for her own different but similar reasons. And she decided to start her own publishing company. And it was less than a week after my separation with this first publishing company that she emailed me separately, with a new email account. Not the one that I had been communicating with her with through the previous publisher. And she informed me she had opened her own publishing company and offered to print my book again. And that she, like I, was impressed by my grandfather's painting and wanted to use his art as the cover art. I was vindicated. And so, the book was published. The first edition was called The Descendant. The flagship is the flagship of the Descendant saga. Because, I had never stopped writing. So at this point, I had 4 books written. But this is the end of 2019, the beginning of 2020. COVID happened in 2020. And my book was printed. And a couple hundred copies were sold. And the world was busy shutting itself away, worrying about other
Dropping a
things.
pin.
And my publishing company died. Slowly. Quietly. Eventually, they admitted defeat, and in 2022, the second publishing company dissolved. I was given all of my print rights back. All of the legal things returned to me, so that I would not have to wait for the standard 3-year contract to expire. At this point, it had been
Proceed to extraction when ready.
almost 2 years to the day between when it was printed and when the publishing company called it quits. I was just relieved to have my book back, to be able to move on,
Tagging map.
try again, to do better. Because this art, this passion of mine, it must be shared, it must be heard. That's why I'm here now, talking to you. As unlikely as it may be that anyone is listening, because that's how the internet is. It's just shouting into the endless void, hoping to make yourself feel better, in the hopes that the blackness talks back. In the time since then, I continued writing and I continued drafting. This first book, The Descendant, that was already published, I made more drafts, more changes, more iterations, and I queried agents, dozens of them, 70
Sending
something.
down support weapon.
And that brings me to
Deploying
my
sentry.
next complaint.
Sending down equipment package.
And why I started this with the metaphor about brightly colored, mass-produced video games versus gritty, meaningful the Helldivers. Publishing industry is under attack because AI exists. Most of these queries I sent out for my book were never answered. There was a few that I was, answered with a thanks but no thanks. And even fewer still, I got actual hand-typed personal responses, not just formula email, that talked about how, the publishing industry had standards now. They didn't want to touch my book because it had already been printed by somebody else. And it had some other publishing company's taint on it. So no one wanted it because, who knows what reputation they had. They didn't want that association with their name. And many others, because they're getting blasted with so much white noise, garbage, AI-generated content, they just don't accept submissions anymore, at all, in any way, shape, or form. If they don't already know that your name is Stephen King, they don't care. Their email inbox is closed to you. And that's insulting. This is art. Art that I have worked many long hours for, that I have emptied my soul into. And not that I was beaten out by an AI, but because the AI exists, it was pushing me aside, pushing all writers aside. So eventually I decided I'll just self-publish it. I have all of these books. I'm at the sunk cost fallacy point. Now at the time I had 6 books written. And, I can't sell, get an agent and publish the second one without the first one being available.
ETA T-minus 1 minute.
Put rims on the car without tires on the rims. So, I decided I was going to self-publish. I decided that wasn't good enough because of this assault on art with this exciting, brightly colored, quick and easy, available Fortnite AI
T-minus 30 seconds.
literature in air quotes.
Deploying sentry.
I'm opening my own publishing company. I'm not just self-publishing,
ETA T-minus 20 seconds.
I'm publishing, including myself. Which is how we created Nerdsmith Consolidated.
ETA T-minus 10
I'm
seconds.
not just a wordsmith, I'm a nerd, a lover of science fiction, of history, of the space race, of aerospace and aviation.
This is Pelican 1. I have visual on the
It's
extraction
part of what
center.
makes me an exceptional science fiction writer. I have worked on airplanes and drones and missiles and missile launchers and Ultra 4 race cars. I feel my hands-on real-world technical experience beyond just my existing in the human condition makes me uniquely qualified to be a fantastic writer. And now, with Nerdsmith Consolidated, not just a wordsmith, but a nerd who smiths the words, and we're consolidating all of the other things that I've learned to do through my attempts to self-publish, not just writing and editing, but the audiobook and audio editing, and now creating visual content and social media and here on YouTube. It's all coming together. Check out the links down in the description. Find and join and help us build this creative, curated community for art. Thank you.